So one of the things that I've done in my work is streamline all of the science. Like, what science can we leverage to master our own stress? And I've streamlined that into 10 domains. One of my clients calls it the O'Brien 10. And one of those 10 is...
Welcome to another episode of They Not Like Us. And today we've got an incredible conversation lined up. But before we dive in, I want to remind you to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on the powerful stories, insights, and advice we bring to you every week. And let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome back to They Not Like Us. I'm your host, Aaron, and today I'm joined by Andrew O'Brien. Is that correct? Is it Andrew O'Brien or Andrew O'Brien? Should have checked that before.
It is O'Brien.
O'Brien, Andrew O'Brien. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Pleasure to be here.
My pleasure to have you here. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah. So my name is Andrew O'Brien, and I'm a coach. I'm a life coach here, and I like, my whole thing, my whole lane is stress and burnout. That's where I live and breathe. And I work with folks one-on-one. I support organizations in, like, if there's an organization that's looking to create a health and wellness event for their employees, all in the focus of stress and burnout and how we can live without burnout because it's scientifically possible. That's what I do, and love working in that space because I have struggled for a lot of my life with I call it mastering my own stress. And now that I know what it takes to live without burnout, I want to share it with the world. So,
Well, you speak to the right person, Andy, because burnout is my thing. I burn out a lot. A lot of stress, and I did a little bit of research before the show. So, and there's a poll that found sort of 76% of employees experience burnout, at some point in their life, and 28% report that they're very often or always burnt out. So it's and just from anecdotally as well, from what I've experienced, there's a lot of people who struggle with stress, burnout, that especially around work and that workplace dread, that day before, that fear of going to work and not being able to sleep and all that kind of stuff, and the anxiety that comes along with it. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. So to that point, that, like, this whole term burnout, it really did start in the workplace, but it can really, you don't have to be working to experience burnout. Like, it could happen to us even if we're not, even if we don't have a job that we dread. And that's what I also like to highlight in my work. It's like, we are human, and as humans, we have a stress response system, and we want that. We like, it's there to serve us, it's there to protect us, and it's there to like, in the face of real danger, this stress system is like, it tells us, like, the amygdala in our brain, it's one of the parts of the brain connected to the fear response center. That amygdala tells us, like, what to do in milliseconds. Like, what is our response going to be? Do we fight? Do we flee? Do we freeze? Whatever our amygdala is telling us to do as a way to protect us in the face of real danger. And so we want this stress response system. And so the question is, why do I think there's an increasing rate of high stress and burnout? It's because the amygdala, as much as it's helping us, it doesn't know the difference between a real and a perceived threat. And so it is constantly scanning. And so if you think about, I know none of us were alive back then, but if we can imagine for a moment that we were living in the cave people days, just to kind of throw in some contrast there. I am not suggesting that those folks didn't experience stress. Of course they did. They are human. The difference, however, is that the people who were living back then, they were essentially contained with their own units, their own groups of people. They did not have access to, like, what was, like, they didn't have this ability, right? They did not have the influx of information that's coming to us from across the world these media outlets, social media, and there's a lot of advantages and positives to this technology, don't get me wrong, but what our brains have not evolved to meet up with yet is that constant influx of information, most of it being negative. And so when that amygdala is constantly scanning, if we are not mastering like the difference between a real and a perceived threat, we are very likely going to go down this path of like unmanaged stress, high stress, and burnout. That's one of the main reasons I think that we are experiencing this as a people more often than before. The other thing that I will add in there, and I don't want to make this all about like nutrition, like so one of the things that I've done in my work is streamline all of the science. Like what science can we leverage to master our own stress? And I've streamlined that into 10 domains. One of my clients called it the O'Brien 10. And one of those 10 is nutrition. And I also think another reason for folks, especially in countries that I'll speak about the United States. That's where I'm calling in from. We do not have a food supply chain system that's helping us any matters. And so we can get into the nutrition piece if you want. I have some science behind that, but I think that's the second main reason as to why so many of us are experiencing this stress is because we're fueling our systems with food that's really not nutritious for us.
I feel a little bit targeted here, Andrew, because I'm drinking basically sugar water right here. But I've got an excuse, I've got a bit of a headache, so I'm just trying to hydrate myself and keep my energy levels up. So that's my excuse anyway.
Yeah. No judgments from my end.
But no, nutrition is a big thing with a lot of stuff. Ultimately, the whole adage of "we are what we eat" comes to mind. But ultimately, we are one organism, right? So whatever we're fueling with has an impact on the rest of it because it has an impact on the rest of our chemistry and how our body responds to stuff, right? So it makes sense that it would also affect us mentally and that kind of that stress response, because a lot of people report if they have poor diets that they get kind of brain fog and stuff like that, so it's obviously having an effect.
Yeah, literally, like at my last chat, approximately 95% of our serotonin, which is one of our feel-good hormones, it's like produced in the gut. Insane. Like that's like an insane fact. And our guts and our brains are very connected with what's known as the vagus nerve. And so constant messages going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so if we aren't like fueling our bodies with those nutritious foods that our bodies crave, that serotonin doesn't have the ability to produce in the way it normally would. And that 100% would impact our stress levels.
Yeah, so serotonin, is that the biggest, or what is the biggest kind of influencer, chemically on the brain when it comes to stress and burnout?
Well, one of the stress hormones that's very much a part of this conversation is cortisol. Cortisol is one of our stress hormones, and when that rises for long periods of time, that can absolutely lead to negative health outcomes.
Yeah, because chronic stress is related to heart disease and loads of major medical issues, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So what happens is when we are at the top of this show, I was talking about like we want this stress system to work for us, and that's the goal. The goal for me is always like to go in and out, like that flow state of being a human, because we're not going to avoid real dangers in our life. Like that, it's just the nature of being a human. And so again, we want that stress system to work for us. What happens when if we experience something stressful and then we don't bring ourselves back to that homeostasis, if we get stuck there, if that stress response remains activated. What's some of the stuff that's happening within our bodies is that, yeah, that cortisol spiking for long periods of time, and then cells from different parts of our body that's not connected to the stress response. So let's use the kidneys, for example, right? So during a stress response system, cells from the kidneys will actually stop doing what they're doing to support that response. And that's happening throughout the body. So think about these cells like that were born to do a certain job within our bodies. They're temporarily diverted, and we're evolved to meet that demand. Temporarily being the key word. But when these cells are for long periods of time supporting that stress response, their work is not getting done. Like their main work is not getting done, and that's when things start to fail within our bodies, like physically and also emotionally as well, and mentally.
Yeah. Do you think we put too much pressure on ourselves and that kind of increases our stress? Do you think, that we're not really, aligned with our needs and our limitations, really?
I do. Many of us believe that we put pressure on ourselves. I've been doing a lot of work with personality type as well, and especially as it relates to the 16 personality types and um, Dr. Dario Nardi's work. And there are certain types that are more kind of aligned to put pressure on themselves. I just happen to be one of those types as well. Uh, I I did put a lot of pressure on myself growing up as a kid, and just through living and experiencing uh I'll just share my story here because I think it's relevant. So as a kid, I never felt like I fit in. To some degree, I still don't feel like I fit in to this world, but I'm a lot better with managing myself. But as a kid, I am a gay man. I was a gay boy back then, and what I was seeing on the news back then, again, getting to that like negative news influx, I was seeing other gay boys like getting bullied, getting beat up, getting killed even, and so technically that is not a real threat to me, right? It's not happening to me. But what my brain told me, because I wasn't checking my amygdala told me that this was a real threat. And because I did not have the tools that I have today in managing all of that, what my brain told me then was, all right, I need to figure out how to fit in and hide that part of me, because that's the way that I'm going to survive. That's the way that I'm going to live. And so the ways that I chose to do that in my high school anyway, that there were basically like two ways to fit in. One, become an athlete, or two, become a nerd. And I chose, like, I wasn't really like physically fit back then, and so I'm like, I'm not going to go down that route, so I'm not going to be successful. So I chose to like the nerd path and the study path, and from that, like, the more I studied, the better grades I got. The better grades I got, the more like positive reinforcement that I got from like society, like whether that be like my parents or the teachers or all the awards that I got, the high GPAs. And then that translated into, all right, now I got to get into like the best school possible, like college wise, and going through that process and sticking with like the same study, work hard, and that like translated then into my professional career, like putting so much pressure on myself to just like to fit in, um and then you know and once you habituate all of that stuff, like it just happens until you have awareness of like, whoa, wait a minute, this is like not sustainable. And so over a year, many years, I came to the realization, I was like, all right, this is not healthy. And this is not a healthy way to be. This like self pressure. I think that self pressure to some degree is very beneficial for us, and that's where the positive nature of stress comes in my view. Because if you want something, if you want to achieve something, if you want to obtain something that you truly want, yeah, put that pressure on yourself to go get what you want. But it needs to be for the right reasons. And we need to kind of constantly check ourselves and maintain what I call that O'Brien 10 now. Thank you, client, for coining that term. But yeah, I really do think that we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves for many, many, many different reasons. And the reason that I just shared is just one of the many.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely do. And listening to that story there about, and I've talked about this on many a podcast now. I'm probably boring people to death with it. But, when we go through school, we're expected to fit in this specific box, aren't we? All through school, through the early life. And like yourself, being gay. And I take it you didn't want to express that because of the fear of ramifications of other people and stuff like that. Hopefully we don't get that in schools anymore, and hopefully we've moved on from those days. However, we're still expected, even if we were open about sexuality, we're still expected to fit within a certain confine, aren't we, a certain box, and socially, and that puts a lot of pressure and stress on people and stops them being who they are. And that's part of this podcast, to be honest. It's like, that's why it's called They're Not Like Us. It's about being yourself, being true to yourself, and being able to be authentic and free of the pressure of trying to conform to every kind of situation, every box. How much do you think that kind of feeling like you have to fit in a box, because it goes beyond school, it goes to university, it goes to when you start a job, you kind of want to fit in and you kind of have to fit in. How much do you think that stress is really, playing on people and grinding them down more so than the other stuff, really, than the actual workload and everything else?
I think it's a huge part of it. And one of the areas that are also part of that O'Brien 10 is connection. And in that connection piece, I highlight 3 prongs. And one of these 3 prongs, I think, is very relevant to that question. And that prong is connecting to ourselves. And what do I mean by connecting to ourselves? Like establishing that like optimizing the relationship we have with ourselves, and that is like who are we fundamentally, right? Like I mentioned personality type just a bit ago. Based on the latest science, 40 to 60% of our personalities we're actually born with, which I find fascinating. The rest of our personalities are filled in by environmental influences, how we're raised, conditioned. But that 40 to 60%, like we have a certain preference coming into this world on doing things and being. And so it's getting like spending time, like who are you fundamentally? What are your values? What is important to you in life? Because if you are making decisions and taking actions that's not in alignment with what's important to you and your values, 100% you're going to hit the burnout train, because you're living for other people. You're not living for yourself. And the more that you do live for yourself, by the way, the more that you're going to be able to better serve other people and love other people in the way that you want. So it's not like a selfish thing. It's just it's an important thing for us to do. And then on top of that, because our brains are the way that they are, they're like 95% machine, I call it. And then they're there to be efficient with whatever information comes through it. That brain is looking to become efficient with it. And that's how biases are formed. And so biases are very normal, and it's important, however, to kind of like maintain that awareness of those biases. And that's what that 5% of our brain is what I call the mind. And that's where we have the power to make different choices and things. And so I encourage folks to like identify what might be that internal track in that 95% of that efficient brain of what could be those self-limiting beliefs that you have. What are you telling yourself when you're not feeling so good? Because I think more often than not, it's going to be a negative thing. And if it's a negative thing that you're telling yourself, that's going to lead to the upward spiral of, or I should say, downward spiral of high stress and burnout.
Yeah, and interestingly, obviously, the environmental piece. If you're living for somebody else, or to fit in with other people, you're going to end up putting yourself in an environment where you're not comfortable, and with people that don't necessarily aren't a good fit for you potentially, and that
Hmm.
can just make it even worse, and you just snowball, right, and get you that burnout even quicker.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think I found an interesting quote actually, that burnout is what happens when we try to avoid being human for too long. So when we try
Mm.
to be too perfect, try to be something we're not for too long, that's when we kind of burn out. And I think we're all guilty of that. Where we try and present the best version of us to the world, be that in the workplace, be it on social media now. That's a big thing, isn't it? Where everybody's posting, they have to appear to be, living the best life all the time, rather than, just being raw and honest.
Hmm.
There's a lot of pressure on people, and it starts from an earlier age. That social media is putting a lot of pressure on younger kids, and the younger generations, because they're trying to keep up with their friends and to seem cool, etc. Whereas I don't know, in my day, you'd go to school, you know, whatever happened in school, if you're trying to fit in, do whatever. But then once you went home, you were away from it. Whereas now, there's no escape from it, is it? Because they've all got phones. That social life follows them the entire time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're spot on there. It's like, how come I didn't get this like? How come this person got like way more likes than I did? What am I doing wrong? Leading to all those kind of like negative things about yourself, and then that's going to build over time. 100%. I agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know how they cope with it, to be honest. It would crush me, I think, all that, like the extra social pressure and stuff.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
tough. And I think like to build on, we don't allow ourselves to be just like human. I also think like we we're we're not taught like how to do this. We're not taught how to master our stress. And I really hope that does change down the road, because it is a thing. It is a thing that so many of us are experiencing. And we are living in a different period of time than those cave people. And I think because of that, it needs to be baked into our education systems, and like, what is the science, and how can we keep applying the science so that we can be humans today, and live without that burnout. When you live
yeah,
without that burnout, you're gonna be that much more clear on what it is that you do want, and things become that much more possible. And that's the beauty of you know working in this realm, in seeing the transitions that folks make once they like master their own nervous systems, because that's at the end of the day, we're walking nervous systems. And we need to honor that and respect that, and get to that flow state.
yeah. And I think when you get to a certain point, you can, when you get to that burnout point, you can really feel like you've lost control of your life, can't you, at certain points? And I've seen something from you mentioning about kind of taking your power back. How
Mm.
What would that look like in kind of practical terms for somebody?
Yeah, so I think the first step is, and my brain just went there because of what you just said about the when you're on that burnout train, it's like you feel like things are impossible. You feel like you can't get out of it. Uh, the first thing, the foundational thing, is to have that kindness for yourself, the compassion for yourself. Know that you are a nervous system at the end of the day, uh, and know that just as you got here, you can get out of it, because our bodies are. No, there's a cat. um, our bodies are designed to go into that flow state. You can get in and out of it, and so having that self compassion for yourself is number one. And then number two, it's applying the science, because another fun fact here, folks, is that I mentioned the amygdala already. When we are in high stress, when that stress state is activated for long periods of time, that amygdala will actually expand in size. There's two other brain parts, and think about that. That's driving our fear response center. So with an expanded amygdala, it's like on overdrive now, like scanning for like more and more and more and more threats, and most of these are going to be like perceived and not actual danger. There's two other brain parts that will actually shrink in size. The first one being the prefrontal cortex here, and that's mainly connected with our executive function, our rationale, logic, reasoning, positive emotions are even stored there, and the hippocampus. Positive emotions are connected there, learning, memory. Those two brain parts will actually shrink in size if our stress state is engaged for long periods of time. And so biologically, it's no wonder why we feel like it's impossible to get out of, because these brain parts are not to our advantage at that period of time. But with the available science, we can work to shrink back down that amygdala and re-expand, the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus to our advantage, to help us taking our power back. And if you want, I can get into some of these other domains of science, as to how we can take that power back, but we'll pause there for now.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to get there. Do you think kind of taking a break is a good way to kind of reset? I mean, it's not going to resolve all your issues, but you kind of reset your brain and kind of come back with a fresh approach. The whole just need to take a holiday, just get away from things, change the scenery, kind of refresh, have some positivity, and that can have a positive effect on people, right?
Yeah, rest. You hit it, and you haven't seen this yet, and so yeah, rest is one of these 10 domains. Based on the latest research, our brains actually fatigue after about 90 minutes of focused activity, and that could be sooner, or it could be longer, depending on how intense that activity actually is. But 90 minutes is the average, and our brain is not a muscle, and so like unlike the muscles in our bodies, like when we're using them, they send signals to the brain in real time, like, oh, I'm tired, let's take a break. Our brain doesn't do that for itself, and so it's important to know like that 90-minute on average rule, because like it would be beneficial for us to figure out how we might be able to sprinkle in some breaks throughout the day, and we're not talking about like every 90 minutes take an hour break. Unless you have that kind of bandwidth, go for it. But generally speaking, we don't have that kind of bandwidth, and so a few minutes, that's all it takes. Whenever is convenient and realistic for you, because I know that there's some other professions out there that like a surgeon, for example, or nurses in the OR, like if they're on a case that's going beyond 90 minutes, it's not like they're going to stop and say, oh, we gotta give our brains a break. I get that. So whenever it is feasible and most realistic for you, maybe it's after that OR case, to focus your brain on something that is uplifting. That's one of the keys here. So it's not just giving your brain a break from doing what you're doing, but it's focusing on something else that brings you joy, that is uplifting. And so maybe it's looking at your camera roll, to see some pictures that bring you joy. Maybe it's listening to a song that you love. I've literally been like on a song on repeat for the past 2 days. Maybe it's thinking about a loved one. Maybe it's thinking about a vacation spot. Like there's so many different things that can bring us joy, and that's the key, is like focusing this brain on something that's uplifting. The more that we sprinkle in these little breaks throughout the day, the more effective we are, the more productive and efficient we are with the actual task that we are doing. So yeah, totally on board with the rest.
Yeah, and it's important that, like the things that you said there, these little things can make a big difference. Like especially if you work at a desk, or if you work from home, even if you've got a pet or something like that, because pets can really help. Kind of, they can be a pain in the butt. Like my dogs are a pain in the butt. Don't get me wrong. They're always barking, but they're also great. 5 minutes with a dog and you forget all your problems. Like they just because they just have that kind of ability, don't they? So
Hmm.
be it a cat, a dog, whatever it is, if you've got a pet, something like that, that kind of 5 minutes can really reset you and get you kind of happy and out of your own head.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, it's crucial to manage your stress though. And do you have any kind of techniques for people who are kind of in stressful situations? So for instance, people who are in stressful jobs, but kind of have to, like you say, don't have that opportunity to take themselves away in the interim, be it like maybe they're in emergency services work or something like that. Do you have anything that can kind of help relieve the stress in the moment?
Yeah. Uh, as cliche as this might sound, breathing, conscious, deep breathing, we could do that anywhere. Even if you are performing surgery on a patient, even if you're working an ambulance, that breathing is actually, I think it's the quickest way to signal to the brain to get back to homeostasis, to, all right, time to chill. And I know like maybe what you're doing in the moment is not something that's chill, but taking those deep inhales, fueling your bodies with that. Our brains are actually, they use approximately 20% of our total body's oxygen supply. And shallow breathing is not getting at it. It's not doing it. And I'm throwing myself in this mix right now too, as someone who shallow breathes. Like this whole podcast, I've lost sight of my deep breathing and I've been shallow breathing. But now that I'm talking about it, I'm more conscious and aware of the deep breathing. And there's so many different kinds of breathing methods out there. So I encourage you and folks to kind of take a look at these different methods, because the whole thing about these 10 ways to master our stress is like, yeah, they're applicable to us as humans, because we have nervous systems, we have that brain. But how we apply this into our life is going to be individualized. It's going to be personal. And so a breathing method that you like, I might not like, and that's cool, as long as we're like both getting that same amount of oxygen. We have the soft belly breathing method. You have the 4-7-8. You have the box breathing method. There's a ton of different breathing methods out there. And the whole point really is to just remain as much as we can conscious of that deep breath work. And that is one thing that I will always say to someone who feels like they can't do anything. We can 100% breathe deeply.
Yeah, and that's a really important point as well. It's about finding what works for you as an individual, and everybody's lives are slightly different. Everybody is slightly different because of how they feel, how they operate. So it is important to find, we can use the science and these proven techniques to find what works, and then we can kind of find what actually works in your life. Because if you're not going to use it, then it's not going to help, right? So you have to find a version of it or a way that it actually works with your life without causing too much disruption, I suppose. Because if
Yeah.
it's too disruptive, or if the cost of doing it is too high, then you'll never stick to it.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So with your clients, then, how do you kind of assess that? How do you kind of figure out? Was it just a trial and error over time? How do you figure out, what's going to work for them and what to implement?
Yeah. So when I work with my clients, like the first thing that we do, part of the intake process, like they would do a personality type assessment. And we would uncover what that personality type is, and then right off the bat highlight those different modes of operating for that type. And there's 4 of them. We would identify the strengths of that personality type. We would identify right off the bat those some of the stress reduction strategies, and this is all baked in science. That's the first thing that we do. That not only allows me to get to know the client a little bit better right off the bat, but the client will learn more about themselves as well. Which that's what it's all about, and that's why I love this work. It's increasing the awareness because from the awareness it becomes a possibility. So that's what we do as a first step. The second step is all about, I mentioned that O'Brien 10. It's like I've created like this wheel of stress, and we go through each of these domains, and I highlight what the science is, what the recommendations are, and then we kind of see like, so how would you rate yourself based on all of that? How would you rate yourself 1 to 10 in each of these domains? And that uncovers the start of a personalized roadmap for someone to focus on in mastering that stress. And then once we kind of co-create that roadmap, we work in that way, and at the right time, as I mentioned before, once we get that stress under control, that's when our real like visions and hopes and aspirations come very, very clear. There's more energy behind it, there's more motivations behind it, and that's where we spend the rest of our time.
Yeah, I suppose that helps. And it probably, I don't know about all your clients, but me especially, I think until recently, I didn't understand myself enough. And doing these things like these personality tests, having somebody to kind of talk through these things, because we're very focused on looking out, aren't we, at the exterior, out the outside world, at everybody else, and not very focused on looking within to try and figure out, why am I reacting this way? What's going on, with my body? Why are these things kind of affecting me the way they are? And until we do that, then we're not really going to get to a point where we can, implement anything of value, really.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to use the word cliche again. Like this work is 100% that announcement that we hear on planes. If you've ever flown before, the announcement that I'm a big traveler. Every single flight I've been on, if in the case of emergency, you got to put on your oxygen mask first before you can help anyone else. Because if you don't, you're not going to be around to help anyone else. And like, so it's really, this is not selfish. It's actually selfless by putting yourself first. Because when you put yourself first in this way, you're going to have that much more health, longevity, energy, and love to kind of keep giving out to this world. And I can't underscore that enough. It is not, and I know, like, I've worked with so many people that have told me, like, it just feels like selfish, like a selfish act. Like, I want to take 2 hours for myself. People think that that's a selfish act, and it's not. It's really, really, really not. It's a selfless act.
Yeah, it's important. I don't think we do it enough. I've used the oxygen mask analogy before. I really like that one. It really kind of hammers it home and gets that message across in a way that a lot of people can understand it. But I
Yeah.
still think, even though we understand that, I still think a lot of people don't do it and won't do it. And because they do think it's selfish. But when you think about it, if you're stressed and you're irritable and you're on edge all the time, how you behave and how you interact with other people is going to have an effect on them. So it's going to have an effect on your family, your loved ones, your friends, and you're going to be snappy and just not give them kind of the time and effort that they deserve. So, you do really need to take that time for yourself, however that looks, taking that 2 hours. I do it. I use the gym. That's my outlet. I go to the gym, and that kind of really helps. And if I don't go for a period of time, if I'm injured and I don't go for a week or something like that, then
Yeah.
I notice it almost instantly.
Yeah. And I would even say, especially with the introverts out there, they actually need to be alone to recharge. They need to be alone to increase their energy. And if they're not, that's going to 100% lead to them feeling drained, high stress, burned out. But yeah, everyone, extroverts, introverts alike, but I think even more so, introverts need to be mindful of that alone time, because that is truly how they increase their energy.
Yeah, it is very important, and you've got people like especially now with technology, some people who just like take their work home with them as well. So there's, they just
Hmm.
never switch off. Or like entrepreneurs are really bad for it, aren't they? They're like small business owners because they think they have to do everything all the time, and there's just never any downtime or off switch.
Yeah, yeah, and we need it. We need it. It's not sustainable, right? Like, yes, we can go after the things that we want, and I'm a big believer in that. But we need that downtime. We need to learn how to turn that off switch. We need to optimize all of the science and in the way that works for us, so that we are our best selves, and that's what it's truly all about. When we are our best selves, everything else flourishes.
Absolutely, Andrew. With chronic stress, have you done any work on the kind of the connection between chronic stress and mental health?
Chronic stress and mental health. When you say mental health, what are you referring to?
So the impact of chronic stress on mental health. I can't get my words out. So I'm thinking more like, if you're being chronically stressed for a while, um, does that then, or can it then result in mental health issues such as depression
Uh,
and other factors?
yeah, yeah. So thank you for clarifying that. So yeah, we uh if we find ourselves in an activated stress response system, we are very likely also going to find ourselves experiencing physical stress symptoms, emotional stress symptoms, which would kind of like fit into that mental health bucket, and behavioral stress symptoms. And these will kind of like come out in different ways for different people. Some of the ones that I've experienced are, have you ever had like an eyelid twitch?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Imagine that for a year straight, like an incessant eyelid twitch for a year straight. It was like not painful, but like the most frustrating and annoying thing that I've ever experienced, I think. Um, some of the more painful ones I've experienced, this might be TMI, but like a bout of hemorrhoids, not fun to go through. I've also had a diagnosis in my right eye called central serous retinopathy. And what that is like the optic nerve like is like this, right? But mine went up like this because it filled up with fluid and it impacts the vision. And so when it was first happening to me, I was like freaking out. I was like, am I losing my sight? So I got it checked out. And he basically said, the doctor said that, you know, this generally happens with perfectionists, like type A people, and like take care of yourself and it'll resolve. And it did. Unfortunately, when it does resolve, like your vision is not the same as it was. But at least I know I'm not losing my vision. So all sorts of physical things can happen. Skin rashes, headaches are other things that folks experience. Some cancers even. Um, the physical thing, yeah. Also, yes, going back to the mental health question, 100% activated stress can lead to us experiencing depression, anxiety. And that is a very real thing for many, many people. Another one of these domains of science that there's a whole body of science in connection with this particular topic, and that's called the mind-body syndrome. And what's happening there is that when we don't express ourselves, when we don't express what we're feeling, these emotions are stored within within ourselves. And it goes back to we weren't taught how to manage our emotions. We're humans, and so as humans, we are emotional beings. We're never not in a mood. We're always going to be experiencing something. We literally have neuropeptides throughout our entire bodies, and our brains are basically telling those neuropeptides like how we should be feeling. But I don't want to make a generalization, but I'm going to say, generally speaking, we don't know how to manage these emotions. And in fact, we're probably taught the opposite, which is to just get over it, suck it up, don't confront them, And so we learn and we're conditioned to like hold on to this stuff and bottle it up. And the more that we bottle it up, there's only so much space in the body for these things to go. And at some point they will explode. And they're going to explode in the physical symptoms. They're going to explode in the emotional, like the depressions and anxieties. They're going to explode in the behavioral stress symptoms. Because what generally happens again when we're not so we avoid confronting the painful emotions. We generally go to the quick fixes that feel good. So maybe it's the cigarette, maybe it's the drink, maybe it's the drug of choice, maybe it's the dessert, the sweets, or the bag of chips. And like over time, we know that's not great for us. That's not sustainable for us as a human. And so to answer the question, yes, I do a lot of work in this realm. I am not a therapist, so I don't I'm not clinical in that way, but I absolutely work with clients in that emotional management realm to support them in creating goals around that so they can kind of, relieve whatever might be happening there and get more of that release and freedom and peace within themselves.
Yeah, I think it makes sense that it kind of impacts that because it impacts everything. Like we said at the start with nutrition, right? Yes, we're one organism. We're not. We can't separate us out. We are one organism, and stuff will impact our entire organism, right? We can't get away from that, so we have to appreciate that and deal with that as it is. The other question I was going to ask you is, there's a lot on neurodiversity now, and a lot of a lot more kind of awareness, a lot more understanding, I suppose, on neurodiversity. How does that kind of play in with stress and the other stuff? How does that? Because from my experience, people who are neurodiverse generally can be a little more sensitive to the stress and the pressure. So, what's your experience of that?
Yeah, it's my experience is, and I wouldn't know how many of my clients kind of, I mean, I would even say that we're all neurodiverse, honestly, but I wouldn't know like the number of clients I've worked with in that realm, in that population, because not many, not everyone's sharing that stuff. Like, but it's truly understanding the science, knowing, like getting back to knowing who you are. If you want to know, if you want to learn more about your neurodiversity, check in with an expert on that. Do your own research on that. But at the end of the day, these 10 domains of science, they're going to apply. And so if someone is a little bit more sensitive, which I think is a beautiful thing, then I think it's important, that much more important, to be more mindful and more aware of the available science, the latest science, and that's what I would share on in that realm.
Yes, like I say, it's not a bad thing to be more sensitive, but again, it comes down to that understanding yourself and doing that kind of work to look within, figure out,
Mhm.
who you really are, who's, what's impacting you, what you believe in, what makes you happy, what makes you sad, all that kind of stuff that we need to do, that for some unknown reason we don't do it. Throughout
Mhm.
our life, it takes something to happen, like us getting to the point of burnout before we'll do something. Um, and like you say, we spend our lives kind of hiding our emotions or pushing them down. People saying, suck it up, man up, all that kind of stuff, and you've got to get on with it. And
Mhm.
yeah, so it's about people kind of slamming the brakes on a little bit and kind of taking a breath and looking in and kind of figuring out, right, who am I really and who do I want to be? Because if you can't figure that out, you can't figure out who you are now and who you want to be, then you're never going to get there, right?
Mhm. Looking inward, doing the work, uncovering it, yeah, uncovering who you are at the core and who you want to be. That's power. That's power. That's taking that power back.
Absolutely. And, it's that being vulnerable, ironically, the more vulnerable you're able to be, the more strength you'll get, and the more, the more purpose you'll have in your life, and the better your life will become and that's just from my experience, anecdotally, but, generally it seems to be the case.
Yeah. Yes, vulnerability can also be like a very scary thing for somebody. And 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 so if there are people listening right now who are thinking that, how can I possibly open up to somebody? I've been hurt in the past. I've been taken advantage of in the past. Or it's just a very scary thing to do. I strongly encourage you to find the people or the person in your life that will embrace that vulnerability, because there's so much like liberation when you're able to be vulnerable. And if you don't have someone in your life who you can fully trust right now, search for someone who like at a professional level who could serve that function. And yeah, that vulnerability, like, because without that, I always say, like, with the clients that I work with, the more vulnerable the client is, the more transformative their journey is, because they're bringing to the surface like what's really at the root of what they ultimately want and what's blocking them from getting there. And there's so much, yeah, Aaron, so much strength behind being vulnerable. But I also want to be very mindful of how scary of a thing it could be to go there, and encouraging for folks to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as a society, I don't know if it happens as much now, but it definitely did when I was growing up. Um, we're terrible for it, because especially as young men, we're kind of taught vulnerability is weakness, and that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of pushed on us, right? Vulnerability, boys don't cry, all that kind of stuff, right? You get given all that,
Yeah.
and you carry that through life, because that's a lesson you learn, and you learn it generally from like family members, or coaches and teachers and people that you kind of trust and respect. So you take that on board, and then you spend all your life kind of trying to be stoic, I guess, trying to cover up the emotion.
Yeah.
But it doesn't serve you to do that, and in the long run, you just end up being somebody you're not, and you end up being unhappy and don't even know how to express it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That hits home for me. Uh, like, my best mode of operating is extroverted feeling, and for like years, I was like bottling everything up and not express. And so think about that. Like, the core me was like not doing what it was born to do. Like, and so yeah, it's so true. And there's so many things like that. And so that's why it's just like it is so critical that we tap into who are we, how can we learn about ourselves, and bring that to the forefront, and just be you, do you. And as long as you're not bringing like harm to yourself or to anyone else, like, do you, be you. And uh it's liberating. It is fully liberating.
Yeah, and when you're not, you can feel it, right? You just feel it in yourself. You just something's not right, something's missing, or you just know when you're not being yourself.
Yeah. And that in my experience is a telltale sign of like, okay, yeah, we're in our stress mode right now. We're not ourselves. And so what can we do to get out of that, for sure?
Absolutely. Andrew, where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you or learn a bit more about you?
They can find me, they can go to my website, and which is www.themindblowingcoach.com. They can actually grab a free download of these 10 domains of science. It highlights these 10. That's an option. And then also if folks wanted to schedule a free stress relief strategy call with me, my booking portal is like through my website as well.
Cool. So the strategy call, is that kind of just kind of advice on like, kind of get to know people and kind of figure out where they're at and try and steer them in the right direction?
Yeah, that call, what we would do is get clear on what they ultimately want, what they're finding challenging right now, seeing how we might possibly work together, and if we don't feel like it's a fit, providing other information and resources that might support them in their journey ahead. That's what that call's all about.
Yeah, I love that, because it's really important to see if it's a fit as well, right? Because there's I've talked to like different therapists, coaches, and everything, and not everybody suits everybody, because it's ultimately a relationship between a coach and a client, right? So you've got to kind of get that fit to make sure that you're both getting the best out of it, each other, really. So that's important, and the only way you can do that is by having those conversations, right? Jumping on a call, kind of having them conversations to try and figure that out. So I think it's really important that you do that.
I know if I was a client looking for a coach, I did actually back in the day. I did work with a therapist, and I was like shopping around because you want to find someone who you click with, and the therapist that I ended up going with, honestly, it was like I had a Zoom background at the time that was like a picture from my recent travels to Kenya, and we did not know each other at all, and out of nowhere she's like, "Is that Kenya?" I was like, "What?" Like, Africa, okay. I would have gotten the Africa because it was pretty African, but to say Kenya out of all of the 54 African countries, that was insane to me, and just her general vibe clicked with. Yeah, it's important to find your person if you're looking for that kind of support, and I encourage people to shop around for sure. So this call hopefully will give someone that opportunity to shop.
Absolutely. I do think it's important, because too many people go to like therapists or coaches and go, "Oh, no, it doesn't work," when
Yeah,
actually it's just not the right fit for them. But they need to
yeah.
kind of figure out what is the right fit for them. Andrew, I'm going to bring this to a close very shortly. Before I do you have any kind of final thoughts or messages for people?
Yeah, you are all incredible. You are all amazing. Have compassion for yourselves, the nervous systems. If you are currently in that high stress burnout zone, I know it's not fun. And even if you are not in that high stress burnout zone, I hope that you've picked up at least one parcel of knowledge here that you could take away and incorporate and apply into your lives. And you are in control. It may seem like your nervous systems are in control, but you are the ones that are in control, and you can create the realities that you want. I promise you that that's a thing, and it's totally possible to live without burnout.
Andrew, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And the stress and burnout is so big, and people are not coping with it very well at the minute. So I think this is really pertinent and important for people. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you so much again for having me, Aaron. It's been a pleasure for me to be here.
Thank you. Take care, Andrew. Bye.
You too.
Thanks again for being part of this journey. Stay tuned. We've got even more great conversations coming your way.